I believe on a foundational level that most musicians want to feel like their work is meaningful, or that people are connecting with their music on a level that really kind of feeds the soul. And that's why I think most passionate musicians make music. And so I was finding that to be the case, especially in this setting, in these underserved spaces, these really invisible spaces. A lot of people don't end up, unless they have a family member, spending very much time in nursing homes or assisted living facilities.
One life, one passion, one focus.
You're listening to the On the One podcast. I'm your host, Phil Donaldson, with a question for the musicians out there. Are you looking to change the world with your music? How about thinking a little smaller? Stay tuned and all will become clear.
It's time to get down on the one.
My guest this episode is Hanna Doreen Brown, founder and executive director of Sound Effects, that's Affects with an A, a nonprofit organization whose mission it is to meet the needs of those prone to isolation and who lack access to public music performances. Hanna is also a singer-songwriter and integrative artist from Rochester, New York, with roots in classic country and folk music, as well as modern and indie influences. Hanna's love of music, past and present, is evident in the work she does, performing covers and originals in Northern Colorado senior care facilities, and has built her nonprofit program, Sound Effects, around this work. Through her work, Hanna's goal is to capture the stories of the wise, learn a little about a lot, and break down some stereotypes in the process. I'm here with Hanna Doreen Brown, the founder and executive director of Sound Effects. How you doing, Hanna?
I'm doing well, Phil. Thanks for having me.
I want to start off by getting some background from you. Tell the audience what your musical background is and bring us up to today.
Sure. I grew up doing music theater. That sort of was probably my intro into singing and just being musical. A lot of music lovers in my family. In college, I just became more and more drawn to it. I went to a small liberal arts school. It was a nice place to just explore what it was like to study music in a more serious way and kind of draw from my experiences. I started playing piano. I took jazz piano and cello, and I really got interested in music history, this idea of music and something else. I wanted more than performance. I wanted music and history, music and therapy. So I also got interested in musicology, and I ended up writing my thesis on music and the other using sort of a sociology construct. After school, in a super liberal arts way, I kind of moved away from music for a little bit, and I just, was entering the work world, and I did some nonprofit work, and I lived in Chicago. And it wasn't until a few years later in Denver that I really came back to music, and I was going out, seeing shows, and thinking about how badly I wanted to be performing. And it felt like that was a piece that was really missing for me, not participating in music. So as I started to just sort of tread the waters of singing again and performing and booking shows for the very first time, really, in my life, I also found that I wanted to see if I could perform in nursing homes and senior centers as a way to play during the day, to kind of feed that music history side of me. And I was able to really lean into those daytime performances. And eventually I was really drawn to make that my full-time work, playing for older adult audiences.
So was it just the music history that drew you into that type of performing, or was there some other aspect of it as well?
I saw the need. I mean, one of the biggest pieces is that I believe on a foundational level that most musicians want to feel like their work is meaningful, or that people are connecting with their music on a level that really kind of feeds the soul. And that's why I think most passionate musicians make music. And so I was finding that to be the case, especially in this setting, in these underserved spaces, these really invisible spaces. A lot of people don't end up, unless they have a family member, spending very much time in nursing homes or assisted living facilities. And maybe don't understand what that world looks like. But a lot of these people are really cut off from music and arts and socializing. And as soon as I was able to see that and how meaningful music felt to some of the folks that I was meeting, I was instantly drawn to that being, an audience where that connection around music really happens.
So let's get into the reason you started Sound Effects.
Sound Effects really just grew pretty organically out of that individual work that I was doing, going back to a lot of these facilities regularly, monthly, weekly, all around the Front Range of Colorado. I was excited about the idea of starting to introduce other musicians into that setting. At the same time, I was learning a lot about the music community, the music industry, and meeting all kinds of really talented artists and people who would be wonderful artists to bring into these spaces. But I was also seeing that there's kind of a gap there. It's hard for musicians to tap into those audiences and those spaces, from an administrative level. Those facilities are often very overworked and they are not booking agents. They don't necessarily have all those connections to professional artists out there. And I really wanted to just focus on bringing in variety and quality and personable people to these groups who I felt really needed them. And to take some of that burden away from the facilities themselves to make that happen, either from a budget standpoint or an administrative standpoint. I felt like they needed kind of an outside force as well. I kind of had on the back burner the idea that there could be grant funds that could make this happen, that the trajectory might be a full nonprofit. And that's exactly what's happened slowly. First partnering with the nonprofit Partnership for Age-Friendly Communities, which has been wonderful because they were really our incubator. They helped us to kind of form the programs and they lent us the resources in the form of mentorship and team members. And so now we're at the point where we're incorporating into a full nonprofit, which was sort of the plan all along. It's really been very exciting.
Mentorship is really important. How much mentorship did they apply to this? Or in other words, how deep did they go with you in terms of teaching you things you didn't know and helping you through things that you weren't strong in?
One of the real strengths of their model is that they can meet you where you're at. And I had a real need to learn the ropes about grant writing and about those basic steps around program development as well. Toward the beginning there, I feel like there was a lot of really good hands-on grant writing experiences, which for anyone who's kind of gone down that road, it's a tricky one. Grant writing, I think you write a few before you start to get the hang of it. And that was a really big piece, as well as they have sort of a built-in system called the self-directed volunteer teams. So it's almost like practicing, having a board or a more advisory committee, something like that, where they help you to just structure, who would you want on your team? What kind of members of the community are going to help you make this happen and give you that structure of the volunteer team meeting and starting to expand past yourself and the idea. Those were, I think, the two most crucial resources and moments where I don't know that we would have been able to kind of propel ourselves so quickly into the community and, in a way that felt really integrated.
That's really wonderful that they gave you some training and insight into forming a board, because that is such a huge part of the success of a nonprofit. Full disclosure, I have to say here that I am a Sound Effects board member as of this year, 2021. I'd love to hear some experiences with the people that you're serving. What kind of interesting stories have come out of that type of experience?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because I really feel like it all boils down to those moments and those individuals and those experiences. And I should say that was, again, one of the main inspirations, of forming a program like this. There was a gentleman in Greeley, Colorado, who, when I first moved up to Fort Collins, I started playing at this facility, and he was blind. He had recently just lost his wife and moved into the facility. So he was brand new there. He was really adjusting. He would ask for my business card after the shows, which I always found interesting because I knew that he couldn't see it or read it. And, he wanted there to be a picture on it as well. And I think that later he had told me that he just liked to collect those. Those were just mementos of his, regardless of whether he could see it. But the biggest thing was that he would cry really openly when any musician would come into the facility, I found out. And I was really hesitant at first. I was like, oh no, I think I'm upsetting him. But getting to know him and forming a relationship with him and being back every month, he let me know in a really strong way that was his release, that was his joy, that was his way of, expressing kind of the pain that he was dealing with. Right. And that he would never miss a performance, and he needed that moment. And a lot of it was, he would request eventually those songs that made him cry. He loved Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain because that made him think of his wife and he wanted to think of her. And so those are some of the moments of understanding that it's deeper than just bringing in some songs and people smiling and singing. There are other emotions that people want to work through by listening to live music and by interacting with an artist. Just as important as that show would be to him, the time that we spent talking after the show was really, really meaningful to him and to me. That gave me a sense of where he was at, what he wanted to hear next time. And there was nothing more motivating than being able to come back the next time with something that was really going to speak to him. And I've had that experience over and over with different residents and getting to know people. And it's really about connection in that way.
So I would imagine that you're making, a lot of personal connections because those are such intimate settings.
Yeah. And, and that's a little bit one of the interesting pieces of this whole puzzle is that these are not venues, you're not on a stage, you're not in the lights. It's very much DIY music, at its heart. And I think a lot of artists connect with that kind of music making anyhow, because it means that you connect with people on a more intimate level. You go in with your equipment, or you play acoustic and in these spaces, a lot of the time, you're playing in a dining room, in a kitchen, in a hallway. They are setting up music wherever it may happen. So that means that you might be in full daylight looking right into someone's face as you play music. And it is intimate. And it does mean, that it's very real. I think it lends opportunity for more connectedness, because a lot of those other elements have been taken away. And it is our goal at Sound Effects to, sometimes make those shows really special. Maybe we will hire an engineer and give that more kind of traditional live concert feeling. I do think that's important too. But sometimes it's nice to understand we can make music happen in any setting or space like this because the music is what's important.
And this is such a neglected demographic, especially these days. You're making these connections and then lose them. How do you deal with that?
Those experiences are hard. There was another gentleman who passed away, but his family used to come to music at the facility every time they had music there. And we had hit it off so well that they invited me to play for the wife's birthday. And it was a surprise for her. I hadn't seen her since he passed away. And I went to their farm and I played some music and, she hugged me and cried. And it was, I felt really, really, really honored to have gotten that close to a family from this kind of experience.
And there's the consolation that you brought some joy and light into someone's life who really needed it.
Yeah. Like you said, I think that a lot of these folks can feel forgotten and some people have family who are visiting them regularly and some people don't. And understanding that those musical experiences or other activities in the facility and visitors are the only source of connecting to our larger community. I mean, I think about that a lot, how it would feel to lose the access that a lot of us have if we're independent and able to get around. We get to choose the music that we go to. We get to choose the events that we go to. We get to meet people if we want to and reach out in this way. And there are so many ways in which a lot of the folks in these facilities have lost the ability to do that. And people are looking out for their best interests, but they are also managing maybe a caseload of 30 people, or there's a pandemic and people are a little overwhelmed, and things kind of just fall to the wayside if they're not emergencies. And so that's where sound effects comes in, is understanding that people have diverse needs and just how much access has maybe been cut off from some people.
Yeah, speaking of which, how has sound effects adapted to the era of lockdown?
I feel like that there was this great need to feel like we could be helpful and do something in this moment. It was hard to find out what that was. We were all really navigating the kind of shock of what was going on. But eventually, I do feel like it became clear that because of the nature of this virus and the population that we serve, that it was really important to keep going by whatever means we could, to just be an option for facilities to try to do something, and a lot of the facilities have not been able to engage programs during this time. And that's just the nature of this. But we have had a number of facilities that wanted to do something special, in the summertime for Christmas, or even a few facilities that have wanted to continue weekly music one way or another. So what that's really looked like for us is virtual shows, but outdoor shows were really a fantastic option for us because they felt the most similar to our typical shows. They could be safe, and obviously during the warmer months that was easier to do, have an artist playing outside and maybe 6 residents separated outdoors in chairs. And we saw a lot of moments like that were really neat, as well as artists playing music through windows to individuals who were isolated in their rooms. And we really did put as much effort as possible into making sure that music was still a possibility for some of these folks, because we've heard now a lot of stories about not just what the pandemic was doing to this population, but what the isolation because of the pandemic was doing, and how devastating that in itself has been. And it's nice to feel like we can kind of take away some of that severity of that for a moment when we're able to have an artist playing some music for a resident, even one or two songs.
It's been interesting to see the extent to which people will try to make that connection with their loved ones. There was a story last year of a guy who hired a cherry picker crane to hoist him up to the 2nd or 3rd floor so he could see his wife through the window. Which is pretty wild.
I love that.
Yeah. Now, you've done a few live streams as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. Certainly we, again, like everyone else, I think have kind of gone through a lot of the motions of, okay, how do people experience music safely in this moment? What do virtual shows look like? How do you connect best with an audience that way? At first we were doing these kind of from home shows and sending those out to facilities after the fact. And that was really nice. Later we did a really large concert in partnership with Wish of a Lifetime. And that was a really neat moment back in June, where we were able to hire a number of musicians and put on this hour-long concert that really each artist spoke a little bit from the heart to this particular population. And on that day, we got some pictures from a facility where all the residents had dressed up to watch the show. And that meant so much, to know that we could at least kind of reach a few folks during that time. And live virtual shows are not the same for some facilities, and some facilities don't have access, to the technology to make that happen. And so we are really excited for the day when we can get that real live interaction. And Zoom has been great for our shows too, because it means that people can actually be quote unquote face to face and at least see each other while the music is happening.
You had mentioned the fact that not all facilities can do live streaming. Is that why you came up with the musical telegram idea, so that people can maybe watch it on a smartphone or an iPad?
Yeah, the musical telegrams have been really neat. We've gotten a really positive response from that program. And I do think that it makes sense that sort of came along after a little bit of time in pandemic and us and our team understanding, okay, what are the barriers, to our participants accessing music right now? There are a lot. So musical telegrams was meant to kind of take the place of the other one-on-one programming that we've always wanted to focus on. Sound effects was built on this idea of we do performing, but we also like to make things personalized. And we understand that some people want one-on-one interactions rather than group interactions, which is why we had started sending artists in actually for artist in residencies, where they would connect with residents in a particular facility over a course of weeks. We still wanted a way to make those individual interactions happen. And because of so many barriers with the pandemic, we kind of landed on this idea that, someone might be nominated to receive a telegram. And this could be an older adult living in a care facility, living at home. We all have folks in our lives who were really isolated during this time. And, you tell us what kind of music they like, what's their favorite song, or just, what are they like? What would they enjoy hearing? And then we picked out an artist for each telegram and had that artist record a cover of that song or create something for that person, and also kind of include a personal message. And this was usually in video format. We also delivered a couple of live outdoor telegrams as well as some audio telegrams. But for the most part, these were video musical telegrams intended for just one person. So we got to send those out kind of all through fall, and then a large number of them for Christmas as kind of a Christmas gift. And it was really neat because how often does an artist get the opportunity to not think of a whole crowd of people, but just one person? There was something about that felt really meaningful during this time. It was kind of built in a way that ensured that those people could access it because someone nominated them, a staff member or a family member or a neighbor. That person could really help us and ensure that the person who it was intended for was going to be able to watch it, whether that was through their own email or a family member's device, someone who could make sure that this telegram was delivered and then kind of be our point person. It ended up being a really essential piece to it being a successful program.
That sense of connection is so important, especially nowadays.
Absolutely.
So what would you say to musicians who are looking to get into performing for the senior population?
One of the biggest pieces to me, to my own personal experience, and that I like to talk about with other artists running our programs, is what works for you. You don't need to learn a song list that you think is going to work for this audience if you don't connect to it on a personal level. Do you want to play your originals? Do you feel that those are going to really speak to this audience? Do you want to do a mix of originals and covers? If you play covers, what are they and how do they connect to the music that you write? We really have a focus on working with contemporary artists who are out in the community working and who are professionals who can play in a variety of settings. We don't want to separate out, okay, there's music for older adults and then there's music for the rest of the population. This program is about blurring those lines that sometimes we've created as a society around age and ageism. The residents that we play for have a really large range of interests and preferences, and not every show is going to speak to one person like it will another. And that's why we like to bring in variety the same way that you would at any other venue. And so having our artists understand that is part of the role they're playing, is being true to their own music, but then maybe following that line backwards. If you're a pop artist, what did pop sound like in 1950? If you play soul, kind of follow that line backwards. Do you want to learn more blues? Are you, kind of more steeped in Americana and want to go to sort of classic country with some of your music choices? I feel like these are all really neat personal creative growth opportunities for artists in that way, because you could follow your music kind of backwards in time in a way that closes the circle. You can connect your own music. I think that's meaningful on a musical level. And I know that our residents appreciate kind of seeing those connections and getting a really broad range of styles and as well as sort of triggering some of those older memories of theirs as well.
As a singer-songwriter, you get some satisfaction from being able to share your own songs with the folks.
Absolutely. I really encourage artists to share their original music when they want to, because it's important to sometimes have those conversations and hear that feedback from the residents, about what their experience was like hearing your original music. And people ask for that. There are situations where, you're just in the room there and people might talk to you throughout or in between songs. That's a little bit different, but it gives you the opportunity, yes, to find out that they're interested in you. They want to know about you. They want to know about your music, and they want to connect with you.
And that's a different experience. So let's talk about some of the pros and then some of the unknown unknowns of performing for seniors.
Having fresh experiences where you don't know who you're going to meet, you don't know who you're going to play for. You don't exactly know what you're getting into for some of these shows, especially if you're an artist who hasn't played a lot of these. I think sometimes that can be a really important moment and a pro to play in these kinds of shows. Absolutely. Artists get used to going and setting up in the corner of a bar and nobody is really listening and they leave and maybe don't meet. Not that all bar gigs are like that, but I think that like anyone's work or anyone's daily experiences, there are things that you get used to. I think this really mixes it up. You're putting yourself into a setting that, again, a lot of people don't unless they have a family member that they might go and visit in a facility. And so I think it's a really neat experience for people to have a different kind of show, kind of have their eyes opened. I hear a lot of that after performances from artists saying, oh, I didn't expect XYZ. I didn't know that, this or that. And helping prepare artists for that has been important. Some of the unknowns might be, there are a lot of different kind of sensory needs as well as physical needs within a lot of these facilities. From a medical standpoint, there are folks who can't sit for too long. There are a lot of times where, in a different setting, an artist might think, oh, well, was this audience member not enjoying this? But the truth is that staff members come in, residents go out for appointments. Somebody might want to check in for a song and then leave. In some of the memory care facilities that we work in, we get very used to folks who might need to just get up and walk around for a while. They might come right up to you, while you're playing music and want to be closer to the music. There's some real beauty in that, I think, of understanding that you might see people's needs and their preferences kind of showing up. It helps you be adaptable, be adjustable, talk to them, ask if they're enjoying the music and actually adjust things for them.
What's interesting about this is that it's a unique form of spontaneity and serendipity, this sort of intimate live performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes when you're playing a show, you're making these very artistic choices. You're really curating the show. You might have done a lot of planning beforehand about your set list. I feel like sometimes in these settings, having the flexibility to throw some of that out the window is important. And it's kind of neat and freeing when you do. I think about Pandora a lot because sometimes I imagine what it would be like for artists to feel like they were being a human Pandora, right? So you play a song, maybe there's not much of a reaction. You play a different song and you see that one really connected with the audience. And then you say in your head, oh, well, if you liked that song, you would like this song, and then if you have enough tools in the bag, you can shape that set, you can shape that performance on the spot for folks by choosing songs according to reactions. That's something that I really enjoy doing. And I've watched other artists do in the moment, which is really a neat experience.
I want to get a sense of why music for you and why embark on the mission of what Sound Effects is trying to achieve.
Again, I connect with a lot of different arts and I love creativity in general, but music, I get interested about how music is integrated into our lives and how regularly and how it's rare that you find somebody that can't talk about their favorite kind of music. Everybody listens to something and that kind of diversity that it's so easy to access then another person's experience and personality and to connect with them just by talking about music. If music was the first topic that you broached with someone that you were meeting, I feel like you can go deeper, faster in connecting with that person than with most other topics. That's why it feels so right to me to be part of the music world on whatever level that means, right now as an independent musician myself, as well as directing this program and making this program happen and grow. But then, on a special level with populations that do seem to be lacking access to arts or to social experiences, that's where that meeting, where that music comes in, because it so seamlessly ties the two together. That's what I love about doing this work.
So what's the future of sound effects? What is your mission, your vision?
I spoke a little bit about how we have kind of these different focuses with sound effects, one being performance and another being that one-on-one time, the personalized programming. But the third piece that I think kind of rounds some of this out is that we want to engage residents who want to be part of media collaborations, musicians, former musicians who want to talk about their experiences. And that's why we've been working on our podcast, which is called Longtime Listener. And each episode is pretty simple. Each of the episodes that we'll be putting out feature a different resident's musical story. I mentioned musical stories before, and this kind of gets to the heart of that idea where people fluidly talk about the music in their lives as well as the stories that music is connected to. And so, we've gone and edited down those interviews into these really neat 10-minute episodes. And then we will hire one of our artists to create the music for that episode and really kind of respond to the interview musically. And it's a neat way that, a resident might collaborate with an artist, and that both of those individuals can kind of share their work and their thoughts in a way with the larger public, in a way that we can advocate for music being a vehicle for older adults to share their stories. So we're really excited about putting that out into the world pretty soon here. And we think that that'll be a really neat ongoing way that we can engage residents to put their voice out there when they want to.
Wow, I look forward to hearing that. So how can people learn more about sound effects and donate if they want to?
Yeah, we're at soundeffectsmusic.org, and this is sound effects with an A for effects. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, posting pictures of our programs and videos and audio and trying to highlight our really awesome artists. You can donate on our website. You could nominate someone for a musical telegram or just check out what we're doing and figure out how to be involved. There's plenty of opportunity to reach out to us and, either bring music to a facility where your family member is, or, if you're an artist, please get in touch if you're interested in doing this kind of work. We are around. We're open.
All right. Hanna Doreen Brown, singer-songwriter, founder, and executive director of Sound Effects in Fort Collins, Colorado. Thank you so much for being on the On the One podcast.
Thank you, Phil. I really, really appreciate you having me today. It's lovely to chat with you.
It's been estimated that by the year 2030, for the first time in history, there will be more Americans over the age of 65 than under the age of 18. Due to increased longevity and rising numbers in the baby boomer population, senior care facilities can anticipate a much larger patient load. Healthcare professionals are considering cost-effective and non-pharmaceutical ways to improve quality of life for those within long-term care communities. Numerous studies suggest that music can provide positive outcomes, such as reduction of depression, unrest, and behavioral problems. Music has also been found to improve health, communication, and socialization in seniors. As Hanna previously mentioned, performing for the senior community can have a significant impact on the lives of people coping with loss, loneliness, and various chronic health issues. In some cases, music can make the difference between unmindfulness and mindfulness. I remember performing at senior centers when I lived in New York City and witnessing invigorated and engaged audiences who really appreciated experiencing live music in what was essentially their home. You musicians who are listening today can touch lives in a very direct way by performing for senior audiences. My thanks to Hanna Doreen Brown, singer-songwriter and executive director of Sound Effects. You can learn more about sound effects by visiting soundeffectsmusic.org. That's sound effects with an A, remember that. To learn more about Hanna and her music, visit hannadoreen.com. And make sure to keep an ear out for the upcoming Longtime Listener podcast. I'm definitely looking forward to that. And thank you for listening to the On the One podcast. I'm your host, Phil Donaldson. You can reach me at phil@phildonaldson.com. As always, your feedback is welcome and appreciated. Until next time, may you find your superpower, fuel your passion, and light it up.